That's a bilge pump. You may grab the handle right here, sir. Work the handle up and down, and you are keeping the ship from sinking. It's a piston pump. Water comes right up on deck, goes right out through the scuppers. Those are the holes in the Well, these ships are almost always leaky. In a storm, they could become very leaky. On the 4th trip, when the ships get hit by a hurricane, Captain Christopher Newport is pumping for his life, along with the captain himself, the admiral, the governor. They're all setting a good example. Your ship is sinking. You're going to take your shirt off, and you're going to pump for your life, setting a good example, showing the crew how it's done. This is what their bilge pump would look like. It has a leather flapper valve at the bottom. It has a leather cup that goes up and down.
Prime it with a bucket of water?
If you prime it with about a dozen buckets of water, every time you push that handle down, you're picking up a couple 100 pounds of water, and only the top bucket comes off the top. Got to pick up the whole column every time. You do that for an hour, it's somebody else's turn. That's partly why the governor, the admiral, the captain of the ship are going to take a turn and show everybody how to do it. It doesn't happen until the 4th trip when they get hit by a hurricane that you read about them having to pump for their lives. You got cargo down there. You don't want your gunpowder getting wet with seawater. You don't really want your oatmeal getting wet with seawater. Before your cargo gets wet, before the passengers have the water up to their ships, passengers are down below most of the 4.5-month trip. Sailors are down the hatch in the bow of the ship. Sailors, half the crew's got to be working on deck. Half the crew can be resting. You've only got about 8 sailors on a 20-ton cargo ship like Discovery. That's 3 or 4 guys running the ship while 3 or 4 guys are resting down below. Swap out every 4 hours. 12 passengers, 8 sailors, and a captain. Captain tells everybody his name is John Radcliffe. Give you a safety rule. If you're steering this tiny ship across the ocean, the way you get across the ocean safely is you never lose sight of the admiral. Keep track of the big ships and don't get lost, don't get separated. Tiller back there, you're working the tiller to steer the ship. Does everybody know why they're not using a wheel to steer with in 1607?
Hasn't been invented.
There you go. They have not invented the wheel for steering ships. You won't start seeing that arrangement on cargo ships in England until about the 1690s. So not quite 100 years after this trip before it becomes common for cargo ships to be steered with a wheel in England. Hasn't been invented yet, come back in the 1700s.
And that's called the what?
The tiller and the rudder. Rudder, of course, is the part that goes in the water. You can see the tiller, the rudder of the Susan Constant right there. Tiller is the lever coming forward. On the Susan Constant, we have an additional lever, an extension of a 24-foot long tiller on the big ship. That lever that you're actually holding on to when you're steering on the Susan Constant is called the whipstaff. Ships had really gotten so big by the middle of the 1500s. They tell me that most ships, especially big military ships and including merchant ships of this size, going to be steered with levers most of the time from down inside the ship someplace. Got a magnetic compass down there, got an officer up on deck, he's got a compass, he's going to tell you what direction he wants you to go. 20 tons is how much cargo we can carry. It actually displaces quite a bit more than that. Godspeed is said to be a 40-ton cargo ship. That means you can fit 40 one-ton barrels down inside the ship. She displaces, I think, about 150 tons. On either end of the ship, you've got a ladder, so the sailors can go up and down over there. If the passengers had any other arrangements, they don't write about it on this trip. They wouldn't need a very long ladder. They've got barrels and boxes full of their food, their tools, their weapons. They've got straw mattresses down there. It's not going to be a long reach to get up on top of all that cargo. And the truth is, most of the voyage, I'm going to interpret it that this cargo hatch has to stay sealed watertight. On a small ship like this one, especially on a small ship like this one, but really on all these ships, if you're in any kind of weather, your hatches are going to be covered when you're sailing. Even in good weather, you could have a wave come over the side of the ship and get everything wet if you left the hatches open. So to keep the ship from sinking, the passengers, the cargo, sealed watertight down inside the ship for much of the 4.5-month trip. Of course, you got up on deck to get a breath of fresh air. Certainly you're going to get brought up on deck for a little exercise and fresh air. Not during a storm, not during bad weather, not when the sailors are too busy. good weather when everything else is done, small group of people for a short visit coming up on deck. If you go by what people write in their diaries, that does not happen very often, and it never happens during a storm. So not coming up on deck in bad weather. You might be nearly 100 days down there getting seasick before you get off the ship and get a bath on the island of Nevis. So let me give everybody the good news. You got a 6-month supply of food and drink. You've got experienced sailors doing all the work. You've got 12 passengers who are going to survive the journey. Nobody dies on any of the 3 ships as far as we know on this trip. We have no written record of a death taking place on board the ships the entire 4.5-month trip.